Francis Bacon is widely held to be the greatest living painter in the world. He's just been given the exceptional honour of a second major retrospective at the Tate Gallery in London. Bacon was born in Dublin in 1909, although both his parents were English. His father was a breeder and trainer of racehorses. At the outbreak of the First World War, the family moved to London, where Bacon's father worked in the War Office. For the rest of his childhood, the family moved back and forth between Dublin and London. Bacon never had a normal schooling. He suffered from asthma and was tutored privately. In 1925, at the age of 16, Bacon left home. He lived in London for a while, then travelled in Europe. He stayed in Berlin at the height of its decadent period. From Berlin, he moved to Paris, where he visited an exhibition of work by Picasso. He decided to become a painter himself, but when he went back to London, he was known initially as an interior designer. In the early 30s, he turned more to painting, and Herbert Reed featured his Crucifixion 1933 in the influential book Art Now. However, his first one-man show was not a success. Discouraged, he began to paint less and started to gamble. In 1936, Bacon offered some of his work to the International Surrealist Exhibition. It was rejected as being not sufficiently surreal. In the early 40s, Bacon destroyed nearly all his earlier paintings. In April 1945, the art world was shocked by the painting which he now regards as his first serious work, 3 studies for figures at the base of the crucifixion. In your earlier paintings, you seem to concentrate mostly on the head and the mouth. Can you remember painting that in 1949?
Yes, I can. And I had always thought that I would be able to make the mouth with all the beauty of the Monet landscape, but I know didn't succeed in doing so.
Why do you think that is?
What?
Why do you think you didn't succeed?
Well, I don't think I did. I think it should all be much more colour. I should have got more of the interior of the mouth with all the beautiful colours of the interior of the mouth, but I just didn't happen to get it. Well, that's one of the great paintings of the world, of course. That Velasquez is one of the very great paintings of the world, I think. Well, I was very obsessed by that Velasquez, and of course I made a great mistake, and I tried to do these paintings afterwards of the Pope screaming, but I don't think they ever came off.
Really?
I never got the colour, and I never got the screen vibrant enough to be what I really wanted at all. Well, that is just a woman with a... Well, I couldn't put they said, well, why did you put a hypodermic syringe? Well, I said, I want something to nail it to the bed. I couldn't put a nail in, so I thought a syringe was just as good. He said, were you trying to suggest a drug addict? I said, not at all. Just put a syringe in.
You've talked about deforming and reforming reality in your paintings. Would this be an example of it with regard to the body?
I think it would. I don't think you've seen the human body quite like that.
No.
I would say there was some deformation, wouldn't you, in that? I do believe that today, or you could say modern man, wants a sensation really without the boredom of its conveyance, or the cut down of conveyance as far as possible, so that you just give over the sensation.
But do you see any boredom in that at all, of the conveyance?
I think that's a very beautiful painting. And of course it does convey this very beautiful woman lying on the bed. But it's not quite either. You see, you once had that marvellous things to look back on. Whereas when I do the things, I really always try to make concentrations of, concentrations of images. Well, that was a disaster. We could turn that disaster off, I should think.
Why do you think it's a disaster?
Well, I just don't. I just think it just doesn't work.
Can you tell us why you think it doesn't work?
Well, I don't think formally it works. I don't think that bit of rubbish I put in the foreground works. I don't think anything about it works. The layout is rather good, but it's just the rest of it I don't like at all. Wish they'd just burn it.
What do you think about the idea of doing away with story and representation altogether, a la Jackson Pollock?
I've never really cared for Jackson Pollock, and of course, as he's a great hero in America, I said the most terrible thing. When some American cow asked me what I thought about them, she was working for something, and I said, well, I think to me they look like bits of old lace. And that went down very badly, I'm afraid, so I've never been liked in America since.
Do you find any qualities in Rothko, then?
No, that is something that's always escaped me. Rothko completely escaped me. I mean, I always used to think that abstract paintings might at least bring you the most lovely, vibrant colours. But they've got a room of them here. If you want to be really depressed for the rest of the day, you'll go into that room. I suppose you could say that's a quality. It's just that I hate that dirty maroon colour he's used in those things. And if I wanted really to be depressed, I'd go in for a few hours into that Rothko room just to look at maroon. But I could go and look at a yard of maroon that they could roll out for me. It'd be just the same. I think they're the most dreary paintings that have ever been made.
That was a painting that Van Gogh did, and he said about it, I've tried to express the idea that the cafe is a place where one can ruin oneself, run mad or commit a crime. He also said, although he was very, very fond of the painting, he said, it's one of the ugliest paintings I've done.
Well, I don't think it's ugly at all. I think it's an extremely beautiful painting. Of course, I don't understand what he's saying, that a cafe that people are ruining themselves by drinking themselves. If they want to drink themselves, why shouldn't they? And I just think one of the great inventions of it, for me at least, is the way he has done the lights. He's made the light turn around those bulbs, and that in a way adds enormously to without that painting wouldn't have the same extraordinary intensity.
Yeah. When he says that's one of the ugliest paintings I've done, he was obviously aware at the time that people were saying his paintings were ugly. You ran into the same reaction early on in your career, didn't you?
Well, I've never shaken it off. In my case. But he didn't shake it off, I don't think, in his lifetime.
No, not in his lifetime.
Either. But
what do you think of that reaction when people say your paintings are ugly? What do you think of that?
Well, I'm very pleased. I'm genuinely pleased that those people don't like them. I mean, that would be the greatest condemnation if any of them liked them. So I'm much more pleased when they really hate them than when they like them. After all, it means that there might be something there if they really dislike them.
Is this a form of a tribute to Van Gogh?
It's not a tribute. I had to have an exhibition at the Hanover Gallery in 1958, and I simply couldn't think of what I was going to do. I couldn't think of anything to do. And I suddenly thought, well, I'll make the whole exhibition about Van Gogh on the road to Tarascon. I think this is one of the better ones, or the best of the series. I don't think the whole series worked very well. I think this is the best of them.
Can you remember what you felt when you made this painting?
No, don't feel anything when I do paintings at all. I have nothing to feel. I rather like the dog in this painting. I'm rather sorry that I put that image down in the front. I think perhaps it would have been better without it. I don't quite know. I like the dog. It looks as if it's just lying there, as though it's had a really good run and exhausted. And you can see it with his tongue out and everything else. And I like the foot in it. I rather like that painting, I don't know why. And it's because it's really artificial. You could never have You could never have a window just like that, because I think the more artificial they are, after all, art is artifact, and the more artificial they are, the more artificial you can make them now, the better, the more intense they will be.
That figure in the foreground that slightly worries you now, did you put that in last?
I put it in the end. I felt it wanted something, but I couldn't put an awful vase of tulips or something. And so I put this thing in. But I think I could have found something. I think perhaps if I'd used one of the Greek statues or Egyptian statues, something might have looked better. I don't really know.
Egyptian statues are some of the things you like best of all, aren't they?
I think it's the greatest art that's ever been done, actually. I think that the Egyptian things about 2,500 BC to 3,000 to 2,500 are the very greatest things that man has ever made, almost. And you see, they were made by artisans, because they generally had a religious reason behind them. And they were an attempt to defeat death, as all Egyptian art was. You may say we're always trying to defeat death by leaving images, but it won't make any difference. We'll just be dead, and well, the image may live on. The Egyptians have lived on, and they seem more grand now than, I mean, or just as grand, I'm sure, as they ever looked. But, well, there it is. I don't know.
Why are you so attracted to painting the figure? The human figure?
Because it's to me it's the most interesting thing to tell. I'm not a landscape painter. And that thing coming through the blue sky really comes from one of the fates, the Furies, in fact. You know, the Furies that we're all haunted with by all our guilt and our everything. I'm not very much haunted with guilt these days. I don't think I ever was, really.
But you're very fond of Aeschylus, aren't you?
Yes, I do, because it brings up, I read it because it brings up the most, to me, exciting images. That's the reason I often read it.
Because of the Furies and the...
Well, not only of that, but the whole thing, the violence of Aeschylus brings up the images. I mean, if you remember that wonderful translation of one of his lines, the reek of human blood smiles out at me. Well, what could be more amazing than that? It immediately brings up the most astonishing images.
Over the wide rolling earth we've ranged in flock, hurdling the waves in wingless flight, and now we come, all hot pursuit, outracing ships astern, and now he's here somewhere, cowering like a hare. The reek of human blood, it's laughter to my heart.
Well, how long have you worked here?
Well, I've been here for years, about 23 years or more, and it's a kind of dump that nobody else would want, but I can work here. These are my few abstract pictures here, and because I use the walls and things just to test the colours out on.
Yeah. And you like leaving all this stuff there?
Well, I do. I just leave it there. I've even tried to clean it up, but I work much better in chaos. I couldn't work if it was a beautifully tidy studio. That would be absolutely impossible for me.
Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. Chaos, for me, breeds images. I generally try and work regularly because when people talk about inspiration, I think what is called inspiration only comes really from regular work.
You didn't go to art school, did you?
No, thank God. I would have been taught all those techniques which I don't want to know. I mean, I want to find my own technique, because if you're trying to do something that's rather different and new, you can't use the old techniques which have already been used. You make your own technique.
So how did you learn? I mean, how did you learn to make your own technique? By doing it?
Trial and error. By just trying to do it. That's all.
When you come to a canvas, Have you an idea in your head as to what the finished image is going to be before you start?
I have an overall image of what I want to do, but it's in the working that it develops. And you see, it's a very difficult problem, this now, as I'm a figurative painter, and I think that that you can't any longer make illustration because it's done so much better by the camera and by the cinema. So you have to really concentrate on making, you have to, I thought about it very clearly this morning, wrote it down, and I put it in my pocket. Now I can't remember what I was going to say. Can I use it?
Yes, do.
What I thought of saying. And I just said, not illustration of reality, but to create images which are concentration of reality and a shorthand of sensation.
Do you do drawings beforehand?
No.
You go straight onto the canvas?
Yes.
With the paint?
Yes.
What's the advantage of that?
Well, because I find if I drew it, and then I should just be making an illustration of the drawing. So it's so much better to immediately attack the canvas with the paint.
What you like to do, I believe, is to somehow let your unconscious take over. Is that right?
Well, that's as far as one can. I would like it to, because after all, there's this deep sea which we call the unconscious, which we know nothing about. I always hope the most wonderful images will emerge from it.
At the same time, though, you believe in things being deeply ordered, don't you?
Yes.
So what?
I believe in a deeply ordered chaos.
And how do you
in
try?
my work.
How, when you're in front of the canvas, how do you try to arrive at that? What do you go through to try to arrive at that?
Well, because the unconscious things that I try to, the images that I try to make, I still, at the same time, want them to look very ordered.
But you don't want to be in control of them.
Well, this is a great problem. In the very first place, when they come up, you're not in control of them. But when the image seems to emerge, then to make it, you have to control it. But in control, you see, this is where with painting, it's so difficult painting in oils, is you make an image and it's changing all the time. And then it's to do with your own instinct and sensibility, which turns it one way or another. That doesn't mean that I haven't got an overall idea of the type of thing that I would have liked to make, but I don't know how to make it.
Yes. So you come in with an overall image which you don't want to define except through working towards it.
Yeah, no, but that's exactly how it is.
Yes. That's putting yourself at risk all the time, isn't it?
Well, don't you think you have to? At least
Yeah.
as an artist, you always have to. I
Yeah.
mean, if otherwise you turn into an academician.
Are you excited when you're painting, or are you absorbed, or are you depressed, or what? Do you have a particular mood, or does it change a great deal?
Well, of course, it changed like all our moods.
Yeah.
It changes, yes. But I have a very sort of optimistic nature, so I always think something's good's going to turn up, or exciting.
When you're actually following the oil, as you say, you make a brushstroke one way and that takes you one way. Obviously, that's quite dangerous, and it might take you a way that you find you don't like at all. What happens then?
Well, very often that does happen, and just means destroying the canvas.
You actually destroy the canvas?
I do generally, yes. Mm-hmm.
You don't clean it and reuse it or anything?
I don't, because you can't. You see, I work on the opposite side, the unprimed side of the canvas, and that can't be cleaned. It just soaks right into the texture of the canvas.
Yes. Why do you use, as it were, the wrong side of the canvas?
Well, I was living once down in Monte Carlo, and I'd lost all my money, and I had no canvases left, and so the few I had, I just turned them, and I found that the what's called the wrong side, the unprimed side of the canvas, worked for me very, very much better, and so I've always used it. And it was just by chance that I had no money to buy canvases with. Don't change the
How
canvas.
does it work better? I mean, what is better about it? Can you tell us?
Yes, it holds. If you make a mark on it, you can rub it out on a prime canvas and take it out. With that, it's there. It's indelibly made.
I believe that sometimes you use a rag a lot on the canvas, you use brushes, scrubbing brushes to scrub on, you actually throw paint sometimes at canvas. Can you talk about the relationship you have with the canvas in that very physical sense? Why is it important to you to sort of battle with it in that way?
Because if you've ever seen somebody painting a wall, or if you ever paint a wall yourself, you will see that the first mark that you make, and where the brush makes that mark, it has a vitality. That when you've got the overall thing created, it's lost.
And so you want that first mark, every mark to be that first mark, as it were?
Yes.
What's to be gained by throwing paint literally at a canvas?
Well, that was, I only did in a few paintings. I was sick of the look of them, I just threw a lot of paint on them. And they turned out, well, they turned out, as they did. I quite liked them.
Is there any way that you finish a painting, or do you just leave it?
I know when it's finished. I mean, my instinct tells me when it's finished. I can't do any more to it.
Do you work continuously on the one painting or the triptych, or can you work on something, leave it for 6 months or even a year and come back later, or do you clear what you're doing?
No, practically everything I do, I work very quickly, and I work on them. For instance, the triptychs, I can't. As you can see in a room like this, I couldn't work on them all together.
Yeah.
So I just work on them, and they happen to join up.
Yeah.
You see, when I do these paintings, I have had an overall idea of what I want to do, but as I'm always hoping the chance is going to work in my favour, I don't really know. I don't try to read my work. I don't really know what it means. I only know what it means to me formally.
So you're resisting telling a story. I mean, that is not telling a story.
Very, very much so. I don't want to tell a story. I have no story to tell. I like the starkness of the image. I want it to give me a shock. Now, shock, you could say, is a form of expression. But what expression it is, I don't know. It's a visual shock. It's not a shock about... it's not a shock that you could get from a story. It's just a visual shock.
Would you resist the notion of describing that triptych as 3 portraits?
You could call it 3 portraits if you want to. But I don't think of it in that way.
So what is it that you're presenting when you've finished?
Nothing except what people want to read into it. Nothing.
One of the striking things about your studio and the place you live in are the number of books of photographs, the number of photographs on the wall, the number of photographs generally about the place. Why are you so attracted to photographs?
Well, I've looked at every type of photograph. I mean, of wild animals, of movement, of every type of photograph. I don't really care what the photographs are, they just interest me. And every so often, certain photographs bring up images. I particularly liked a lot of these photographs they've taken of wild animals. And I suppose there is another side to that too, that the movement of animals is the actual muscular movement probably has something to do with the structure of many things that I would like to do. They are even stronger than the things that Muybridge did on movement of both the human body and of animals. But I find that very often they are less interesting than the things that have been taken, as you said, just as it were a momentary photograph.
Is that because the fact is that is something to do with that specific thing is happening at that specific time and nothing else, and there's something about that instant, inalienable fact that seems to you to be realer than anything else?
Yes, there you put it very clearly. I think that's exactly what it is. That there it is. It is itself, and it's nothing else.
And is there a sense in which you want your paintings to have a similar?
Certainly. I would like
Impact.
to have them. I would like my paintings to have the same immediate effect that you see of this photograph of this animal after the kill.
You refer to Muybridge, and you've taken a great interest in his work. Of course, he experimented with taking photographs of movement almost 100 years ago now, didn't he? And so
Yes.
we saw movement in a different way, frame by frame. What is his attraction to you? What do you get from Muybridge?
The interest in Muybridge was what was the movement, but he also did people who were deformed and had all forms of deformity, which were interesting in themselves.
Yes. But isn't there something in the Muybridge strips? You do see what appears to be a distorted set of bodies. Is that something that sets you off, do you think?
I think it is. You will find it in wrestling or boxing, anything I look at. I just like the movement and watch the movement of the body. Every possible suggestion can come up from any type of photographs, pornographic photographs, anything you like. All those things can be fascinating. You can see all kinds of interesting and exciting things that you could perhaps use.
You were very actually taken at one stage with X-ray photographs, and some photographer had done.
Well, I had a book on
That's right.
positioning in radiography,
That's right.
which was, and there were very, very interesting things in that. And but it isn't. You see, for me, these things are just these things that are spread around the table are just like like what is called perhaps more conventional. It's called having a model or subject matter. These are my models and my subject matter. I don't feel I'm creative. I'm one of those people who has received a lot of luck and a lot of chance. Because
Why is chance more important than conscious intellect? And conscious intelligence?
I've made images that intellect would never make.
There's a painting called Painting 1946, which somehow summarizes what you became known for. And it was a painting of dead flesh, of meat.
In that particular painting, I tried to paint a bird falling into a field of grass. And then all the kind of marks I'd made on the canvas suddenly suggested this painting, which had absolutely nothing to do with it. And how this painting came about, I can't tell you, but it just happened to come about, and then I suddenly started to paint the meat, and this great image, which is of a kind of dictator, and then the meat around him, it just happened to evolve, and it evolved very, very quickly. And how it happened, I don't know. It is one of the most unconscious paintings I've ever done.
Why the meat? I mean, what attracted you to that?
I used to think how marvellous these extraordinary carcasses are hanging in great butcher shops, hanging from the wall, how amazing their colour was, how beautiful they looked.
You say they're beautiful. A lot of people looking at your paintings think of them as horror images, images of shock, images of blood and dread, and not beautiful at all.
Well, the thing is, what horror, what could I make to compete what goes on every single day if you read the newspapers, if you look at television, if you know what's going on in the world, what could I do that competes with the horror that's going on? Except that I have tried to make images of it, and I have tried to recreate it and make not the horror, but I've tried to make images of realism.
So when we look at your paintings, we're looking at the real world?
Yes, I believe you are. After all, between birth and death, it's always been the same thing. There's always been this aspect, always, of, not aspect, but it's what it is. It is the violence of life. I always think that they're images of sensation. After all, what is life but sensation? What we feel, what happens.
What happens at the moment?
What happens at the moment.
Do you think there's anything that exists apart from the moment?
No, I believe in nothing. We are born and we die, and that's it. There's nothing else.
So what do you do about it?
I don't do anything about it.
You paint it?
I just drift.
No, Francis, you try to paint it.
I try to paint it, yes, but you talk about my own life, but my own life is just a drifting life of going from bar to bar and drinking and that kind of thing. My impulse is my life. My impulse is that I'm an old man, but I'm profoundly optimistic about nothing.
How can you be optimistic about nothing, Francis?
I can be.
Why?
Just existing for a moment. Existing today makes me optimistic.
Optimistic about what?
Nothing. I'm optimistic about nothing. I'm just born with that kind of optimistic nature. I'm just optimistic about nothing.
Why are you interested in the mouth in your painting?
I can tell you why, because many years ago in Paris I bought a book which is on disease of the mouth. And then they were hand-illustrated things which were very beautiful. And I love the mouth because it's rather like, the mouth is rather like a Turner. It's got this always beautiful colours about it. It's got this lovely vibrations of colour between the tongue, the lips, the teeth, all those things.
But, Francis, most of your mouths are black.
I've never been able to make the really successful mouth.
Will you tell me about the history of painting flesh, Francis?
Well, perhaps one of the greatest painters of female flesh was Ingres. I think he made the most marvelous images of them, and I think they are probably some of the greatest, in a curious way, the most sexual bodies that have been made of in painting. No man, probably, who didn't love women's flesh would have been able to have painted as something as beautiful as a Bantuc.
And do you find the same when you paint?
I have different attitudes to life than to you, and of course, but my attitudes are different.
Do you want to talk about that, or do you not want to?
Well, I can talk about it.
Well, let's talk
yes.
about it. What attitudes do you have?
I like men. Of course, male flesh is very interesting. It always attracts me, but that's a different thing altogether.
And what attracts you about men?
Just like men. I like their brain, I like the quality of their flesh.
You obviously love Michelangelo's men.
I think the greatest things he ever did were the drawings, but I think they're the greatest drawings that exist.
You said, I've read that you have said, that he gave the most expansive, you used better words. You said the most...
I tell you what I said. I think he gave the greatest male voluptuousness.
Voluptuousness. That's it. That's the word.
Yes.
Voluptuousness.
To the male body.
That's right. That's right. That's
than any other man has ever done.
Don't you think it's a
And
bit kind of...
volupté is all we want. Voluptuousness.
Yes, I know. It's wonderful, isn't it?
Isn't it a lovely
Absolutely
word?
amazing. And actually, we want to live in a state of voluptuousness.
How right
will
you
do.
are. Whatever it is.
And everything else is a falling away.
Whatever it is, everything else
is a falling away.
is a falling away.
That's right. You're not interested in fantasy, are you?
No, not the least.
Neither am I, not the slightest.
I'm not interested in fantasy. I'm interested in reality.
And what's reality?
Reality is what exists. Are you real? To me, you're real. There you are. There you are, Melvyn Bragg. You are absolutely real to me. There you are, flesh and blood, before me. How are you going to remake that? That's be a real... How are you going to make that in another art?
Why do you want to? That's the interesting question. Why do you want to? Why do you want to?
Because I want to be, you may say, why should you? But I want to be able to remake in another medium the reality of an image that excites me. Cheerio.
Cheerio, Francis. Why do you want to do that, Francis?
Because I like doing it. That's because I happen to be a painter, and that's all.
Most afternoons, Bacon goes to the Colony Room, a drinking club in Soho. He's been going there since it was opened by Muriel Belcher in 1949.
You know, give Vienna a buzz.
Where was the old show?
Yeah, Ripon.
Where?
Yeah, Ripon.
Ripon. I go to Oakley.
Can I have a £50 note or two? Oh, I thought you and I were doing a bit of whoring together.
She's giving him a really bad time, I think.
Sorry, love.
But I have an idea he's one of those men who likes being given a bad time. You know, there's a lot of men like that.
All we want is a room somewhere far away from the moonlight there, with one electric chair or one beyond.
All we want, and that you want, is a dirty old filthy twat.
I like seeing lots of people round, even if I don't know them. You watch the formation of their faces and their movements and all those kinds of things, which seem important to me.
Is this a place you come to a lot here, the Colony Room?
Yes, because I came in when it first opened. I had never known Muriel before, and we seemed to get on very well. And she said to me, Francis, I don't want you to work here, but just bring in people, or people that you know or you think would like to come in and that kind of thing. And I'll give you £10 a week, and all you have to drink's free. So that was very, very helpful to me. You haven't got AIDS, have you? Oh, yeah. It was a place, the people, when Muriel was alive, very much so, where people came in and they were very free and they seemed to lose their inhibitions. It was as though it was like a sort of pool in which they forgot what their inhibitions were, and it was very, very lively and amusing. I never use makeup. Keep your makeup to yourself, you old cow. I'm not one of those made-up puffs. Well, you can. Very old-fashioned, you know. It's a very old-fashioned. It's a very old-fashioned gesture.
Trouble is, I wish he'd stayed a cowboy.
My father was too mean to produce a money.
Mine wasn't.
You said to me many years ago from the womb to the tomb. I think there's nothing better than that, really.
But your life, in a sense, begins in this joint and ends in it, doesn't it? There was a wonderful club across the road, the Gargoyle, where people used to drift onto from here. And then in the bomb site out here, there was a very nice place where about 4 o'clock in the morning you could go and have tea and bacon sandwiches and that kind of thing. And it was a kind of all-night thing. It was a lovely life. But that's dead now. That's past.
I've got to do it myself.
You know that.
I'll do much more money about that.
You know that.
Money, money, money. I'm not here for the sake of work around. I'm not here for the sake of my fucking health.
I knew a lot of people who came in here, and for instance, when I've done portraits, I've nearly always done portraits of people that I've known very well. And I used to know, there's once I've done of Isabel Rawsthorne, for instance. She was a very, very beautiful woman, and I was very, very fond of her. And then all the people that I've painted, really, are people that I've either met in pubs or people I've known. But you know, I generally paint them from memory, and I have photographs of them which I refer to in the things, but I don't use the photographs really to paint them from. It's like a form of reference instead of having them there. I'd rather, and so that's the reason I always paint people that I know very well, because I know the formation of their face, and as in the portraits that I do, I'm always hoping to make an image of their heads, you know, more than just a literal portrait. There's no point in painting a portrait unless it looks like the person, but to remake it so that it turns back into an appearance of the persons but isn't an illustration of them is a real problem. I did do a big triptych of John, which I think is one of the portraits that I've done that have really sort of rather worked. And some of them he's fairly deformed, but nevertheless, I think they look like him.
Why do you want to do 3 portraits?
I've no idea why that triptych series. I think it is one image coming up against another, although they're not in these portraits of John, they are related because they are the same people. But it's a thing of just for some reason, it may have something to do with having watched film, a certain amount of films. It may be something like that that has given me the idea of doing triptychs. I don't quite know how it really started.
Why would it come from films, though, rather than from, say, religious imagery, which is full of triptychs?
It could have come from it could have come from religious things, because I was very interested when I was young. I mean, it's a wonderful thing in the Grunwald Isenheimer crucifixion. And there are several crucifixions of his which are quite remarkable. There's one in Bern. And it probably, as you say, it could easily have come from those those paintings. But in the small ones, it's rather like those police photographs that you see, side face, full face, and they're from left to right, full face, and then right to left, and so on. Yeah. They're rather like that.
Did you make a conscious decision to start doing portraits?
No, I don't really like doing portraits. I don't really like doing portraits. I just do them very occasionally. I've done a number of myself, which it's not because I like my face, because I hate it. But the thing is that I do it because there's nobody else around to do at that time. So that's the only reason. But I don't really like doing portraits.
When you're painting yourself, is there any sense in which you're painting an emotional condition? I mean, those portraits after the death of George Dyer look extremely tragic.
Well, I suppose that what you do is coloured by this kind of psychological state that you're in at certain times. But it would be an unconscious thing and not a conscious thing, because after all, I'm not at all an expressionist painting. I'm not trying to express anything. I wasn't trying to express the sorrow about somebody committing suicide or something like that when I did those portraits of myself, but perhaps it comes through without knowing it.
In fact, there's a triptych of George Dyer, I think, which comes the nearest, almost the nearest you ever come to a story, doesn't it?
It is, in fact, the nearest I've ever done to a story, because that is, as you know, the triptych, that is how he was found. And so to that extent, it is probably the nearest thing I've ever done to something which has a story.
You said that one of the reasons you painted yourself was because your friends were dying around you like flies.
Well, certainly a lot of people that I've known very well have died. They were generally heavy drinkers, and perhaps, I don't know if that contributed to it or not. Well, there it is. It's just the process of growing old. I mean, life becomes more of a desert, in a sense, around you.
Do you think about death much, or...?
I don't think much about it. I mean, I could say that you're always aware of it. I mean, you're always aware of it. It's just round the corner for you. But I don't think about it because there's nothing to think about. When it's come, it's there. You've had it.
But you have an acute sense of mortality, don't you?
Well, don't you think everybody has?
No, I don't think everybody does have. I mean,
No.
you described some time about when you were very young, just having a sense of the precariousness and the precipitousness of life, and never having left you.
Well, no, I certainly have that very, very strongly. But then I think if you have a very strong feeling for life, I mean, its shadow, death, is always with you too.
Mm.
I mean, it's only another turn of the coin.
From the Colony Room, Bacon usually goes to a casino nearby in Soho. Gambling's always been an important part of his life, just as chance and accident play a major role in his painting.
$17 black.
I like the atmosphere of casinos. You talk to people at the bar, and there's the excitement of whether they're winning or not winning, and the despair of people who've lost everything, and all that goes on in a very concentrated space.
Yeah. I believe you generally play roulette, do you?
I do.
Why is that?
Well, they say it's the silliest game you can play, and the odds are, because the odds are more against you than all the others, but with the odds as they are, if you happen to hit the numbers, which I play on, sometimes your returns are very rapid. I'm a heavy loser in the end. In fact, I think I must be the perfect compost for casinos, because they must love somebody who comes in who's always losing. And I always remember many years ago there was a casino which doesn't exist now in Curzon Street, and I happened to have known the man, and I'd been in there once or twice, and I won or lost something. And he came up to me and he said, you know, Franz, you can run up the bill. You can pay us by cheque. Well, everything went wrong for me, and I lost about nearly 40,000. And I certainly hadn't got 40,000 in those days to pay, so it took me months and months and months to repay this man.
Do you feel that that you put other parts of your life at risk as you do when you're gambling? Do you think it's necessary for your painting to...
I think risk is too strong a word. I always think of risk as being people who take real risks, like risk their lives. I don't think gambling's a real risk.
So this is a different sort of luck from the accident you're talking about in your painting?
Yes, it is.
Can you tell us what the distinction is, then?
Well, the accident in painting is an accident you can make if the accident, as it were, something comes up, and you can use it, and you can develop it. Whereas with gambling, every time the wheel spins, there isn't anything you can do with it.
The one thing that comes compellingly from your work is that the experience that matters most to you is the experience of other human beings. Is that right? I mean, is that
Yes,
the
that is
most
so.
important?
Yes, yes, it is. Much the most important, yes.
In the paintings about two people, there are almost always couplings. Are you interested in groups of people in any other relationship?
Oh, certainly I am. I don't happen to paint them, or perhaps be able to paint them. Partly the couplings are, or you call couplings of two people having sex, is that it's one of the things where generally they talk less than in when when they're talking to one another in conversation or something like that. Because I'm not really a conversational artist. I don't do conversation pieces. And the coupling of them is a way, really, of cutting all that out. Because whatever conversation they have, it may be fairly short.
It could be said that they're all violent couplings. Would you agree with that?
Well, I suppose most couplings are violent, aren't they, fairly? I mean, they're more or less. But I suppose perhaps when you ejaculate, they become more violent.
And that's the nature of the violence in the painting.
I think it probably is, but I don't really know. I mean, they're figures coupled, but I don't know how violent they really look to other people.
Is there a sense in which you're representing the bodies almost in their animal way?
Well, of course, we are animals, aren't we? We are just part of animal life.
But doesn't that lead you to think that life there's not much point in trying to improve life for other people and that sort of thing? Do you think there is?
Well, I'm not a do-gooder, and I suppose one should want to improve life, and one should want to. I don't like to think of people. I don't want to think of people suffering, but then they do, because they breed at such a rate that they're bound to suffer.
Are you interested when you're painting about whether the painting will talk in terms of pain or pleasure, or do those sort of things interest you or even enter into what you're doing at all?
Well, I hope they'll look like a reflection of reality or recreation of reality. But you could say that reality, nearly all reality, is pain. I mean, if one wants to read it that way. When I say reality is pain, what I do feel, if you're going to catch anything that is really real in painting and making images, they will, when you say, I don't think they're painful. I think if anything is strong, people think it's painful. I don't think my things have anything to do with pain, in fact.
Are you surprised your paintings have become so successful?
Very. Yes. I am surprised. I never thought they'd sell at all. I always thought I'd have to take some other kind of job, but that's luck.